Hello and welcome to the coronavirus update for the 8th of April 2020, where this is again the Johns Hopkins uh, Viral Resource Center. There are about 1.4 million cases worldwide, about 0.4 million of them in the US, so getting up for a third, and there have been about 82,000 deaths worldwide. Now, what we're going to do today is we're going to previously we've only had this number here. We only had, I'm going to call them reliable numbers on the confirmed cases. There weren't enough deaths to make sensible predictions about how many dead there will be in total. But sadly, there are now enough people dying in America that from just the death statistics alone, you can actually make a reasonable estimate of the total that you're going to expect and what the maximum rate is going to be. And the quick numbers are maximum rate of death is going to be in about 10 days, and it's going to be about 4,000 people per day. That's the more optimistic number. The less optimistic number is almost double that. And total deaths is actually better than, it's just under 100,000. So how do we get to those numbers? We need this is the US total cases. So this is what the total confirmed cases of coronavirus look like in the US. And then as you can see, they're starting to enter a sort of linear regime here, which is good. That means that you're going to peter off soon. Now, of course, the death rate follows this. So the death rate is currently in this sort of region down here. So what we've done previously is we've just taken the daily increase. What's the fractional daily increase in the daily new cases of coronavirus? And if you do that, you get this chart here, where this is what it looks like for Italy, the purple line. And at first, the spread rate is about 1.3-ish, and once their confinement methods kick in, it gets down. And once it gets down to 1, of course, you're completely under control. US is currently here, right? So if I actually show you where's their data run out? Data runs out here. So that's what the current data looks like for the US for the change in the rate of spread for new cases. This isn't the number who died. This is the number who get the virus. And I can make an extrapolation from that. It's just an estimate of what it's going to look like in the future. And that line there has a certain gradient. Yeah. And we're going to see how that compares. That gradient there compares to the gradient that you get for the number of people who are dying from coronavirus in America. And you do that, and you get to this chart here. So, and this one here. Okay. Let's get this all set up here. We need that one. We need that one. We need that one. Good. Okay. So this is what the decrease in the rate of new deaths looks like versus the decrease in the rate of spread, and those gradients are almost identical. Any differences that you're getting is because the scales are slightly different. It's decreasing by about just under 1% per day as a total spread rate. Yeah, it's not decreasing. It starts off at about 1.2, and so the next day it's 1.19, 1.18, 1.17, and so forth. So we can now take a look at these are the actual deaths in America at the moment, and we can take a look at where we've actually got data for. And what you've actually got data for is this. And so we can now project if this is the decrease in the death rate, which is the same as the decrease in the spread rate, what's this going to look like over the next 2 weeks. And you do that, and you get to this. This is going to be total number of dead, by the way. So total number of dead peaks out at about 90,000 here. This, in reality, will go like Italy did with the... It'll plateau out at the end here, and there'll be a huge tail on here that'll probably go up for another 50%, I would guess. But the worst bit is over in how many days' time? It's about 2 weeks, I think. You're on day 38. It's over by day 60, so it's about a month. 20 days. No, 3 weeks. 3 weeks. And with this, this is now your deaths per day. At the moment, you're just under 2,000 per day. It's going to get up to about twice that in the more optimistic scenario. Now, it turns out I've actually kind of fudged the data here. Turns out, this is just to give you an idea of how sensitive all of this is on really subtle changes to how quickly this comes down to 1. Right, the actual number for today is not 1.16 as changing the rate of people dying. It's 1.18. And if I use that as the actual number and extrapolate it down from there, the projected number of dead goes up from 100,000 to 150,000. So my reckoning was, I just put in a guesstimate for what I think it's more or less realistically going to be. So that I think is what's realistic. I can also change this number here, and so what's it at the moment? At the moment, it's a 0.5% drop per day. Let's turn that to something a little more. And now you're down to about 70,000 dying in total, or we can actually make it somewhat less here. Let's go for 4. And at that, it goes up like crazy. So you're really sensitive to what the change in the death rate is. I mean, this goes up to... Oh, God, you're not even there at that. Yeah, it goes up over 200,000, and you would peak out at about 10,000 dead per day. So that gives you some idea of the spread that you're looking at. My reckoning is, from sort of eyeballing it, it's about there somewhere. Yeah, this is maybe even more. Yeah, let's go for that. Yeah, I mean, but given that it's got to be the same curve at some point, that has you just under 100,000 total, and a maximum dying per day of about 4,000 per day. Now, there's a lot more I'm seeing in the media these days about, this is all China's fault, and, China was lying to everyone. And I saw Trump today blaming the WHO, the World Health Organization. So, maybe now would be a sensible time. He was saying that the US spends $65 million per year on the WHO, and that this was, a lot of money, and that, everyone should, maybe they shouldn't be paying that. So maybe a useful time to reflect on what the WHO costs. WHO costs America about $65 million, and there are about 300 million Americans, and Trump's saying this is a terrible amount of money. Why do we give them all this money? Well, the WHO costs your average American $65 million divided by 300 million Americans, 20 cents per year. Less than a quarter per year is what the WHO costs your average American. Meanwhile, the recent bailout for the coronavirus was $2 trillion. 2,000 billion, or that many million. In fact, it's even been increased recently to, they put another 225 billion on top of it, which means that the bailout package for the current pandemic alone is 250. There we go. The bailout for the current pandemic alone has cost your average American about $7,500. Now, who is to blame for all of this? Well, I've seen a documentary recently that basically says it's all China's fault for covering it up. Thing is, yeah, it's true. For about the first month, China was fairly active in trying to cover this up, most particularly around Christmas and the New Year time, where they were threatening whistleblowers and all sorts. Now, I've got to give them a little more credit than everyone else, because China, unlike everyone else, had to, first of all, have people get the disease, then they had to work out what the hell it was, right? For everyone else, they didn't have that lag period. And so by the 9th of January, after this, China is actually pretty transparent about what the hell's going on. So on the 9th of January, the WHO issues a worldwide alert. On the 12th of January, China actually makes the entire genome of the virus publicly available, right? So all of that, sequencing the entire genome of a virus, it's actually, to get that done in this sort of short period of time that's pretty impressive, and given that what happens in China, all of a sudden someone comes in with a respiratory illness, who knows what it is, right? It takes you a while to work out what the hell's going on. But yeah, for certain they were trying to cover it up about Christmas time. 20th of January, WHO declares a public health emergency. 23rd, China puts Wuhan on lockdown. And from that moment onwards, it should be bloody obvious to everyone in the entire world that when China is suddenly locking down a city of, the size of New York City, that they're not doing this for shits and giggles, right? This thing is serious, and it should be obvious to everyone by this point. And it's a week after that Trump sets up his task force to monitor the virus. Now, in early February, like really early February, I actually made my video on this, based on the spread data that had been made public from China from about the 20th to early February, which is 3 weeks of data. And this is what that spread data looked like. Now, actually several first world countries here, you have to tell me which one is the fake data from China. The one that was published before any of the other data actually existed. It turns out this is the fake China data. And, for me, just from that data alone, it was clear that this thing had a ferocious spread rate. It had a reasonable mortality. China had locked down a New York City-sized place. It was obvious, to me at that point that this thing had legs and should be taken seriously. And by the end of February, Trump was calling the coronavirus their new hoax. And that's about the time that he was downplaying we've only got 15 cases and they're all getting better. It's all in hand. And at this point, China bears their fair share of blame for this stuff, right? They also deserve their fair share of credit for stuff like this, right? And also the WHO, they weren't exactly behind the clock. Yeah, I mean, WHO is not a perfect organization by any stretch of the imagination. But, what's its primary role? To basically act as a central signaling system for this sort of thing. It did that okay. I mean, it's not a perfect organization. But, if you're looking for people to attribute blame for as to why this went from 15 cases to 400,000 in America. It's not the leadership, it's the lack of leadership. Anyway, so that's the update for today. I hope you found it useful. If you did, give it a thumbs up, and I will see you next time.